Welcome to The Drift, a podcast about urban exploration, psychogeography, and why it matters. Each episode, we take you on a deep dive into the city, because every place has a story. I'm Carolyn Sinclair, and I'm here with local artist Andrew Glass, and for the next 30 minutes, we'll be exploring the city and exposing her secrets. First off, what exactly is psychogeography? Psychogeography is the study of how place affects human psychology. Guy Debord, the French philosopher, defined psychogeography as the study of the precise laws and specific effects of the geographical environment, consciously organized or not, on the emotions and behaviors of individuals. In other words, how does the city affect people? And that is important because we are all being constantly influenced, subtly and not so subtly, by our environment. And historically, the primary tool for exploring psychogeography is an urban walking practice known in French as dérive, or in English, to drift. Guy Debord described the drift as a mode of experimental behavior linked to the conditions of urban society, a technique of rapid passage through various ambiances. Tonight we begin the drift in Los Angeles, a city that needs no introduction. We're starting here because LA is such a layered city, and tonight we're starting our very first episode of The Drift in the heart of Hollywood. Tonight's drift requires a little backstory. So around 2012 or so, I found an article written in 2011 by the late Philip Coppens, and in the article, it proposed that the phallus of the Egyptian god Osiris is possibly buried under a pyramid in the Hollywood Hills. So if your memory of Egyptian mythology is dusty, Osiris is the Egyptian god of the underworld. He's also the Egyptian god of vegetation and birth and death and rebirth. And in the article, it details how this best-selling author from the late 1960s wholeheartedly believed that the phallus of Osiris is buried under the hill, where the cross is, right at the Cahuenga Pass in Hollywood, right alongside the 101 freeway. So, of course, this author was pretty eccentric, but she had the means, and in the early 1990s, she paid a small fortune of her own money to have surveys done using the most advanced technology at the time. And apparently, according to the article, she was able to get confirmation that there was indeed some sort of subterranean structure under the Hollywood Hills. So according to Coppens, the writer of the article, her friends and family confirmed seeing this documentation. But when the author died in 1995, all the documentation of those surveys disappeared with her, and now we're left with just another Hollywood legend. But finding that story made me look at Los Angeles and Hollywood differently. Previous to that, I completely avoided that part of Hollywood, and I thought of it as kind of a tawdry, tourist trap. Even when I lived a few blocks away, I never went down there. But after that article, I was really curious about that hill. Why was there even a cross up there in the first place? And I was curious enough to at least want to look deeper into it. And eventually I climbed up there myself just to kind of feel it out and check it out. So anyway, cut to years later, post-COVID, I shared this article with Andrew, and I invited him to go up on the hill with me on what would become our very first drift together. So that was essentially our episode 0. And that's how we started the idea of collaborating on the drift. So tonight we are starting at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, and we're talking about this amazing city and all the mysteries here.
Yes, thank you for that. The psychogeography is a really interesting idea to me, and I know it is to you. And eventually, we both climbed that hill, like you mentioned.
Yep.
And I guess the myth was, to me, why I got hooked was first there was, you said there was a penis of Osiris underneath the hill, but also that it could have been a pyramid, and that there might have been terracing, and I'm really interested to see how that works. And there's all kinds of speculation whether, Linda Goodman's people found stuff. Evidently they did, and the papers disappeared. So the whole mystery was really, really interesting to me, especially because, we lived down the street in Hollywood all
Right.
those years ago.
and never went there.
Right. I mean, everybody avoided that area.
Right. So anyway, so it's interesting that full circle, we ended up together going up that hill in Hollywood and checking out the part of Hollywood that's kind of the epicenter of Hollywood, I would describe, which is Hollywood Boulevard, where the Walk of Fame is, all the stars on the ground. Tell me, what is your feel about that place?
Well, since we had so much history, you and I, and when we started to go back and recognize all these structures that I had sort of passed by through the years, just going through Hollywood and recognizing, kind of stripping away all the other things that were so commercial and seeing the original buildings that were made, in the early 1920s. And there's many of them. I guess we're going to talk about that. Also, we should, talk about how we both came back with kind of new eyes, right?
Right. So both of us, we met years and years ago, and when we both ended up in the same kind of artist colony in a big house in Hollywood. And we were kind of peripherally connected, but not really close friends. And then we both went our totally separate ways and had families and lives and traveled. And then post-COVID, we ended up reconnecting, and that's how this kind of came about.
And developing the drift, or
yeah.
This is a really interesting sort of philosophy about, when you go to a place, whether there's a mystery there or not, you have to go with sort of new eyes and understand the history and the nuance and sort of the residual. Is that a word you'd use? The residual effect
I would say, the residual energy of a place.
Exactly.
I mean, as esoteric as that sounds, you can walk into an area and feel, the residual energy of things that have happened there, people who have been there, and I think that's a really powerful way to look at the world.
Walking on Hollywood Boulevard is like no easy task.
No.
I wouldn't do it unless
No.
like I was on safari with you,
Well,
you have to have your backpack, all your gear. You got to bring your art with you, man.
Right. But it's interesting you use the word safari.
Right.
I know you've traveled to Africa and literally done safaris, but it's interesting to apply the idea of safari into the urban environment, and especially the Hollywood jungle, and it is a jungle.
Yeah, because it's a bit of a search and experience.
It
and
is.
We like to think of ourselves as seekers, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't have any specific commands and answers to other people, but I think I ask smart, perpetual questions. And yeah.
Hey, so I also want to, before we break here in 3 or 4 minutes, can you read the introduce Alan? I'm sorry, that was the.
Okay, yeah. So we found
That's
this
a good
quote
description,
about,
don't you think?
Yeah, I really like this. So I found this quote about psychogeography, and it just really resonated with me, and I wanted to share it. So this is a quote from Alan Moore, who, if you don't know Alan Moore, he's a comic book writer from England, and he wrote V for Vendetta, The Watchmen, From Hell. And so anyway, here's his quote. "It is the way that we internalize the landscape around us. Yet, if they understood the richness under the paving stones that they walk every day, if they understood the astonishing mythologies that were connected to these places, the histories, then they might feel more like they were walking through the eternal golden city. If they were to internalize that, they might start to feel like the empowered and mythical creatures that inside they want to be."
That's awesome.
Right.
I mean, that's the best description of psychogeography I've read. There's a few of them.
Right.
But that might be the best one.
So it feels to me that, especially when you live a place a really long time, you really stop seeing it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Right. You really do. I mean, you're driving where you need to go, to your Trader Joe's, to your Target, to your AutoZone, and you're not really feeling into the place because you're so familiar.
Is it kind of like when you go, was that always there? Like
Right.
like, was that there before?
Right. Well, that's you paying attention, I think.
Right.
If you start saying, how long has that been there? I think that's you starting to pay attention on a different level. And so what I was moved by learning about psychogeography was it's a way to experience the city with new eyes, even a city that you live in and have been in your whole life. It's a way to feel into it and drift through the city without any fixed agenda. And that's a powerful way to see the world without any fixed agenda. Because
That's
truly,
right.
the mystery can come to you if
Yeah.
you're open in that way.
So do you want to take a small break, just
Yeah.
a small break, and then continue to talk about some of the structures and some of the ideas that we had in our Hollywood drift?
Perfect. Let's do
All right,
it.
let's take a small break.
All right. And we're back. Thank you so much for joining us. So we started our drift in Hollywood, and we started at the Hotel Roosevelt, which is the oldest continuously operating hotel in the city. It's been operating since 1927, and it's also the original home of the Academy Awards show. It was first held there before it was held across the street where it's held now.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we started in a historic hotel, but let's talk about the cross. The whole idea of the drift came to me because I found this article about this cross in Hollywood, and truly I always wondered, like, why is there a cross in very secular Los Angeles? How strange is that?
I kind of never noticed it until you point. I mean, I think I noticed it, but I really, if you drive by the pass, there's no like church up there. It's just like, a triangle shaped hill with in the dark, it floats. It's all lit up. It's beautiful, kind of, right?
Right. So, after reading the article, I kind of looked into the cross, like, why is this here? So it's a 32-foot tall cross, and it lights up at night. So if you can't see the hill in the dark, say, it just looks like a floating cross in Hollywood. So yeah, I wonder why is that there? But apparently it dates back to the 20s. That's when they built it. And apparently the official story is that it's a monument for a woman named Christine Wetherill Stevenson, who was an heir and like a philanthropist who did a lot of arts activism in the day and setting up theaters and community theater projects in the Hollywood area. She's the person who helped build the Hollywood Bowl, which is on the one side of the Cahuenga Pass. And then on the other side of the Cahuenga Pass, she built what they called the Pilgrimage Theater. And the reason they built another theater on the other side of the pass was because she was religious and she wanted to do a play about Jesus, like the life of Jesus. And of course, there was separation of church and state even back then. So she made her
Hollywood
own.
hates Christians.
Right, Hollywood hates Christians,
all
right? You heard it here first.
They're good people, though.
Good people, though. So anyway, so Christine decided to make her own theater because she had the means. And so she made the Pilgrimage Theater, and every year around Easter they did a Life of Jesus play that she co-wrote. And so supposedly the cross is a nod to Christine Wetherill Stevenson, and that's the explanation. So,
but what about the penis under the hill? I mean, that's what's what's driving this story for me.
Right. So when I read this article about the Phallus of Osiris, I was kind of like, wow, that really is mysterious. So that's what made me start looking into the hill and to Hollywood. And
there's other people that have talked about this.
Right.
I mean, I've seen some memes and people that have walked up to the side of the hill and said, "Oh, there's a cross up there, and it's supposed to be, there's some legend,
mystery of it."
Yeah, but me and you, we crawled up to the top in the sand with our boots in 80 degrees, June, freeway hauling by. It was a time, right?
To quote Jack Black, you're not hardcore unless you live hardcore.
There you go.
That's right. So yeah, we climbed up there ourselves, and it's really a wonderful view of the city because it's such a panoramic view where you can see downtown Hollywood, all the mountains, and the 101 blazing, underneath your feet. It's pretty amazing. So,
yeah. And when you're at the top, it does look pyramid-esque shape,
right?
Kinda.
Right. So what I noticed is, like, say on Google Earth, it doesn't really give it justice. You can fly over it and look at it on Google Earth, but it's not really the same as going up there yourself and standing there. And then you realize, like, yeah, there totally could be a pyramid under here.
So just to tease the listeners, like if we get some dough, some money, we'll get some LiDAR equipment.
So you have to say what LiDAR is.
LiDAR is ground penetrating radar.
Right.
That finds abnormal or straight cornered objects that might be purposefully
like
made,
subterranean structures
Yeah.
would be revealed with LiDAR technology. So this was not available in 1995. So the backstory is this author, her name was Linda Goodman. She was a best-selling author in the late 1960s. She had the means. And according to her, this was where the Phallus of Osiris was. And so the story of how she came to believe this was she was staying in the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel on a book tour across the United States. And according to her, and she wrote about it later in one of her memoirs, according to her, while staying at this hotel on the 12th floor, she got a knock on the door, and she opened the door, and there was a man who insisted that he needed to talk to her and he had information for her. And she allowed him into her room, and they talked all night, apparently. And among other things, he told her that he was an initiate of a mystery school, and among other things, that the phallus of the Egyptian god Osiris was buried in the Hollywood Hill, and that's where the cross marked the
Did
spot.
you mention the gentleman's name?
So the gentleman who knocked on the door, according to Linda Goodman, his name was Natan, Nahtan, Natan.
Yeah, and if you Google this, it goes nowhere.
It goes nowhere. There's no one named Natan that you can find.
I mean, there's no lineage to that name, really.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
So this was her story, and she at least believed it enough herself to spend her own money to go look into it. And so that was the backstory of Linda Goodman's discovery from someone who claimed to be part of a mystery school that the phallus of Osiris was there.
Yeah.
So, I was very fascinated with that, and it all started in the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, which is where we wanted to be.
So are we going to talk about our drift through the Roosevelt Hotel, or do you want to talk about this? So before we actually get to the Roosevelt Hotel, can I talk about some of the structures, or at least
please?
Okay, so I mean, I like to say this story because we've talked about this, which is the Magic Castle, which is a place of it's of magic, and there's magicians there, and you can eat there if you don't know. It's a Hollywood icon, right?
It is, but it's literally the home of the Magicians Guild,
cool.
the local union of magicians, working magicians.
So this structure was originally a grove house in 1909.
Correct.
And then at some point down the road, it became the Magic Castle, but maybe even not till the late 50s. So before that, though, it was really let's say 100 or 200 yards down Orange Street, directly into the front door of the Roosevelt Hotel.
Right.
And I'm thinking maybe there was maybe a little bootlegging going on.
Probably.
Between the Magic Castle, the Grove House, and the front of the Roosevelt Hotel. What do you think about that?
Right. So this part of Hollywood, I have to say, is kind of the epicenter of all of Hollywood.
No question.
It's where the Walk of Stars is,
Yeah.
That have people's names on it. And it's where the handprints are in front of the Chinese theater.
The Grauman's Chinese.
The Grauman's Chinese
changes
theater.
names frequently. But,
right.
Okay.
That's all money and politics. But anyway, apparently a Chinese company owns it now, as they own everything. So anyway.
And are we going to just mention the lodge across the street from the Grauman's Chinese?
Right. So in this whole vicinity of all these iconic Hollywood buildings, just a couple doors down from the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel is the Hollywood Masonic Lodge.
Yeah, it's the really impressive structure, right?
It's beautiful. It
looks odd down there.
I think it looks iconic, but it does look different from everything else around it because it's this, neoclassical structure with ionic columns and
Jimmy Kimmel's flag.
Right. So now the Hollywood Masonic Lodge is home to Jimmy Kimmel Live. That's where he does his studio out of. But in 1921, that's when that Masonic Lodge was built.
And we went over there and stood at the cornerstone.
Right. So
and checked it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Every Masonic Lodge is built in a ceremonial way, and there's a ceremony that when they lay the cornerstone, and it's quite a pomp and circumstance. And so when we went over there, someone had thrown security gates in front of it, and it was just completely ignored. But to me,
And you moved them.
I moved them to take a picture.
That's your style.
That's my style. But anyway, this is a historic building, and you can really feel the history in the area. And so this kind of surface Tinseltown grit, to me, is like a thin veneer, because underneath is a real historical area, like a historical core of Hollywood.
Yeah, like the Hollywood sign. I mean,
Right.
it didn't occur to me, although it might for Harry Potter fans, that it's Hollywood. Like
Right.
the wand is made from the Hollywood tree, the
Yeah.
holly tree.
Correct.
Well, that's pretty interesting, right?
So
the whole town is like a wand.
Right.
Yeah.
And I
see.
don't think that's a coincidence.
I thought you don't believe in coincidence.
I do not believe in
Right.
coincidences at all.
Okay.
So Hollywood the holly tree is sacred to the Druids. It's one of the primary trees that is considered one of the most powerful, like an oak and such.
Really?
And the Hollywood is, there's lots of native holly trees in California. The California holly is all over the Los Angeles area. The native people called it the toyon, Toyon, the toyon.
Wow, good information.
Right. But toyon wood doesn't sound near as cool as Hollywood.
But
right?
originally it was Hollywood Land.
Hollywood Land, right.
Yeah.
The sign used to say Hollywood Land.
I think it was a development kind of thing.
Of
They were going
course.
to develop houses and,
Right.
and then all the structures popped up to make. And in fact, no one makes films down there.
No,
It's just,
no.
it's just movie theater, lodge, interesting structures, that kind of thing.
Right.
But also let's take another break and then talk about our drift inside the Roosevelt Hotel,
Perfect.
and then they'll enjoy that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, and we're back. So next I want to talk about the actual drift we did. So we went down there to the Hollywood Roosevelt, and
Actually, we went 3 times.
we did. We went multiple times because I feel like you get a new impression of places every time you go, because you're different, the place is different.
We headed for a bar, which we can say Bordner's, which is a
Bordner's.
beautiful, great bar. And it just wasn't happening, right? We
Right.
drifted in there and didn't feel the right vibe, or
Right.
the frequency,
Right.
and didn't have any preconceived notions. And then said, let's go see what's going on in the Roosevelt. There's got to be a bar in there.
There is. There are great
There is
bars
many, right?
in the Roosevelt
But
Hotel.
continue, yeah.
So we went on a night that, no coincidences, happened to be the opening night for the movie Babylon. So the movie Babylon is with Margot Robbie and Brad Pitt, and it's customary for films to open the day before their official opening date in Los Angeles. And so we went on the official first premiere night of Babylon. Now, the movie Babylon, from the No Coincidences department, is about
Right.
1920s Hollywood. So we showed up to Hollywood, stayed in a 1920s hotel, drifted across the street.
But wait, don't forget to say that actual night, the room. I mean,
Okay.
right.
So from the
Did
No
you not want to
Coincidences.
tell that yet?
No, I'll
Okay.
tell that. So we stayed on the 12th floor of the Hollywood Roosevelt, and we stayed in the very room that Linda Goodman stayed in room 1221, formerly known as 1217.
And we waited for the knock on the door.
We waited.
Because it was 70 years later to the day.
Right.
Is that right? That's right.
Not to the day. I
Pretty
think it was
close.
January
I mean,
1st
no one
for her.
else thought of this?
I guess not.
Because everyone else said, well, you can't see the cross anymore from that room. But that's not right. I did.
Right.
We
yeah.
did this.
We looked up
We
several.
went up the hill and we stayed in the room to look at the cross. And I
Right.
stayed in that little chair and sat and watched it.
Right. So
Yeah.
we chose this hotel room, even though other people had said, like, nope, it's too developed down there now. You can't actually see the cross from the room. But that's absolutely not true. It's a perfect view, straight from the 12th floor, all the way through the Hollywood Hills.
And you gotta also the time before, when we actually said, hey, we're gonna get this room, remember?
Right.
And we chatted up some of the security folks and said, hey, is there, anything interesting, anything you've ever seen? Because there's so much history in the hotel. Marilyn Monroe lived there for 2 years.
Right.
And David Hockney painted the pool. It's just a whole bunch. I mean, everything's going on there, right? They have a bowling alley in there.
They have a bowling alley inside the hotel.
And they have a movie theater, a couple bars.
It's not a movie theater. It's more like a theater, like, like I saw.
Well, they were showing
I saw Jeremy
Life.
Piven stand up there, that kind of way.
But more importantly, we got to the roof.
So the security people are pretty freaking cool at the Roosevelt, and they were really, really kind. And the guy's like, "You want to go check out the roof?" I was like, "Heck yeah!"
No one gets to go on the roof.
No one gets to know.
Neon sign is.
Yeah, right. No one gets to go, but we got to
Hotel,
go.
red.
And so we're up there, and he says to us, "Oh, so the Foo Fighters have played here. Billie Eilish has played here. Who else has played there?
Chili Peppers.
The Chili Peppers." Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't give you LA bona fides, I don't know what does, right?
It was really cool, actually.
It was cool.
It was a coup.
It's a beautiful view.
Yeah. And then we actually went by that room, which the top floors on that section of the building, or maybe that whole side, but you can tell they were built in the 20s. It was really small hallways. And although they had refurbished everything because the room was nice.
Oh, yeah, it's very modern and such, but it really does have a historic feel about it, right? So that's what the drift is feeling into the place and really understanding how a place affects even your own psychology. So I want to also, are we going to describe our journey down to the theater? Down to the theater.
The theater, where we met some folks along the street and chatted them up, see what's going on, see what movie star or what new starlets are getting off the bus and trying to make it, right?
Right. So we wanted to drift Hollywood, and like every good Hollywood drift, you better start and go see a movie. Because when in Rome, So the first thing we did was, after our drink in the bar, we drifted across the street and kind of mingled in the crowd on the Walk of Stars. And
we met a guy from Chino.
Yeah, well, he's
a German from Chino.
We met a German dude who said he came all the way to LA to be a content creator. And we said, "Oh, really? Wow. Where do you live?" And he lives in Chino. And so, as well, I was pretty impressed at the synchronicity of running into two Buddhist monks who were moving around the crowd. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. The timing. They came down to sample the local samsara.
And onions and peppers and hot dogs on the grill.
Right. So there's people like street vendors all up and down Hollywood
Boulevard. And there's a number of Spider-Man.
Yeah, gotta have your Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's down there. It really is kind of a circus cool atmosphere. I mean,
it is.
Everyone's behaving.
Yeah.
And, but there are quite a few puddles of pee that you've got to jump around. But that's just common for Hollywood.
It's a big urban city. What do you want? There's a lot of homeless people here. But there is a particular vibe on Hollywood Boulevard that, even if you walk a couple blocks north or south, it's not the same, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, all of that area is the Walk of Fame.
Right.
So you're looking down, kind of, you can't help but look down to see whose name.
Right.
And every kind of, the wax museum is down there.
Right.
Did we actually get to the Ishtar Gate discussion yet?
Oh, right. So
Let's
at the
do
corner.
That.
Okay. So so across from the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel
and the lodge.
Across the street is the Grauman's Chinese Theater, and this is the one with the famous handprints. And then directly next door to that is where the Academy Awards is held. It's currently known as the Dolby Theater. And that's where all the Oscars are given out. And directly next to it is what is described as an entertainment complex, which means, in English, that means mall, movie theater, food court,
exactly.
Smack in Hollywood. So that's what that is.
Expensive sushi place.
Very expensive sushi. So anyway, we went to, as well, the Hollywood and Highland complex, which is, like I said, directly next door to where the Academy Awards are held. And this is a 3-story mall-like structure with food courts and sushi restaurants. But the crown jewel of the whole complex is a massive 3-story courtyard with a giant arch, which is done in the style of Babylon.
It's huge.
So the story, the official story of why the architecture is Babylonian in the middle of Hollywood, is that it's a nod to the 1916 film called Intolerance, which was directed by D.W. Griffith. And he was one of the early silent film era directors who was he started the whole idea of a blockbuster movie, an epic,
And then
expensive.
they named a park after him.
Actually, that's a different Griffith.
Is that a different Griffith? No
Yes.
kidding. Okay, my bad.
Yeah,
Continue.
Two different Griffiths.
Cool.
Yeah. So, but D.W. Griffith, the director, also filmed Birth of a Nation, which was one of the biggest films of its time, and it was the first movie to ever screen at the White House. And Birth of a Nation was about the KKK in the early days of the United States. And so people were critical of his depiction of the KKK as being the heroes of the story.
No kidding.
Right? Imagine. And so his response to his critics, this is according to what I've researched, his response to the critics was to film a follow-up movie called Intolerance. And it's this very epic, very long, I think it's like 4 hours long, a film about various eras through history, and one of them is ancient Babylonian times, and it depicts various eras of intolerance, as is the theme. So in the film Intolerance, D.W. Griffith built on a massive scale a reproduction of Babylonian architecture, including this massive Gate of Ishtar. So if you're not familiar with Babylon, Babylon was a settlement in southern Iraq, and about, say, 600 years BCE, this was like an epicenter of human culture, like the cutting edge of culture and technology of its day, 500 years BCE. And it was a city that had gates to enter the city, and one of the inner gates was known as the Gate of Ishtar. Ishtar being like the fertility goddess, like the Egyptian Isis would be akin to the Babylonian Ishtar.
How ironic that her mate's penis is under the hill next door to the Ishtar Gate.
Right? There are no coincidences.
Right. I mean, that's a true thing, right? I mean,
right.
So you can see like this Ishtar Gate kind of through. If you look through it, you can see the cross. In the hill.
Right. So the Ishtar Gate in Hollywood, is angled such that it perfectly frames the cross on the hill. And it's interesting because the Ishtar Gate itself, the Hollywood Ishtar Gate, is strangely and conspicuously angled. It's not at a 90-degree angle to the streets that it's adjacent to. Like the closest major intersection would be Hollywood and Highland.
Yeah.
And that's at a 90-degree angle, like most intersections. But this Ishtar Gate on the property is conspicuously cocked to perfectly frame the cross on the hill.
Or the lodge across the street.
Correct. And if you turn the other direction, perfectly framed is the Hollywood Masonic Lodge. Now, D.W. Griffith was a Mason.
Yeah, so I just slightly interject a little bit, because we actually did go to we know a little bit about that, but the Masons, but not a lot. But also I wanted to point out, like in that time when everybody was sort of in Paris and there wasn't film yet, or just was a brand new medium, all these people came to Hollywood, to practice the new medium, the writers. Right. So, I mean, think about that. Like, hey, there's a new way to tell stories. And there's a new way to spread the narrative.
Right.
And to, manipulate.
Right.
I mean, that's what kind of art can be.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I just wanted to point that out.
Right.
The lodge is based right across the street from the Ishtar Gate and everything else. It's just right there.
So there's this perfect alignment, which isn't seemingly noticed by anybody, which is the Masonic Lodge, which is directly next door to the Disney Theater, the El Capitan Theater. This is where all the Disney premieres happen.
Yeah.
And they're directly next door to each other. So the box office of the Disney Theater is right directly next door to the Masonic Lodge. They share a wall. And right at the cornerstone is where the alignment is. So from
Right.
the cornerstone kind of area through the Ishtar gate all the way up to the Hollywood Hill, there's the cross perfectly framed.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an accident. I think that's quite deliberate.
I think so too.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are things that people, you could live in the city your whole life and not notice this alignment.
Yeah. I didn't.
Right.
Before you started pointing these things out. That's why I got interested, because there was so many coincidences.
Right. Too many coincidences, right?
So wait, but do you, so should we talk about the film a little bit? I mean,
About which film?
Well, about Babylon.
So Babylon, which came out the 22nd of December 2022, it's a story about 1920s Hollywood. And it's about the decadence
Beginning
and
of film.
the beginning of film
And decadence, yeah.
Yeah, and how outrageous Los Angeles was. I mean, Los Angeles is the edge of Western civilization. It's where
Good, yeah. We've
Yeah.
talked about that.
Right.
It definitely is. There's nowhere else to go
there's nowhere else to go.
if you're running from any kind of belief or
Right.
structure,
Or Thomas Edison, and apparently the film industry took off in Los Angeles because it was already wrapped up in the New York scene, and Edison had patents on everything.
Yeah.
And so people were fleeing New York who wanted creative freedom, and so they came to Los Angeles. So they were all the way on
That's
the other
right.
side of the country from Edison and his patent laws. So that's how Los Angeles took off.
Can you imagine being here in 1920? I mean, it was just orange groves, people with some money and all kinds of land to do anything you wanted,
Right. Selling the dream, baby.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Do you want to take a small break before we talk about our last little bit at the
Sure.
the Roosevelt Hotel?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, we're back. So, regarding psychogeography, I found this quote from Terence McKenna. And if you don't know who Terence McKenna is, he was an ethnobotanist who was really into consciousness studies and was quite inspirational to me. Anyway, I found this quote. He says, "The mind is more powerful than any imaginable particle accelerator, more sensitive than any radio receiver or the largest optical telescope, more complete in its grasp of information than any computer. The human body, its organs, its voice, its powers of locomotion, and its imagination is more than sufficient means for the exploration of any place, time, or energy level in the universe." So I really liked that because it resonated with what I feel is myself being a sensitive instrument. I'm able to drift into a city, into a location, and feel the resonant energy of it. I'm sensitive enough, as he says, more sensitive than any radio receiver, to feel into a place and to know it better. And so the drift for me is a way to experience a city, even when you've seen over and over, in a new way. When you go into a city without an agenda, it's like you meet the city halfway and allow her to dance with you. So the night that we did our drift in Hollywood, we didn't have any agenda. We truly just felt where it felt right to go.
Right.
And so we started at the Roosevelt because it was kind of ground zero of the myth, the rumor that the Phallus of Osiris is in Hollywood. And, even if there's not any literal physical object there, I feel like symbolically, all of Hollywood is a magic wand.
For sure.
I mean,
I'm convinced of that now.
Right. What is a phallus except a wand?
Well, that's true.
Right.
Yeah, I guess my first inclination was whether there was really a pyramid there, and then also why would there be a pyramid there and a penis there and all this myth. And I guess my question is like, why would somebody say that? I mean,
Right.
we're trying to find that out, but
But even if there's not a physical, literal object there,
Right.
there is a wand in Hollywood. Hollywood is the wand of the world. It really is like the pineal gland, the seat of the imagination of the whole world.
so I'm confused whether we're trying to point out art or some kind of spell.
Well, according to Alan Moore, I mean, a spell is just to spell. Like to speak is to cast spells,
suppose.
right? And apparently the word grimoire, which is an ancient book of spells, is just from the word grammar, to speak.
Okay.
I mean, speech is a code, right?
Right, but how come Hollywood seems to be a manipulative tool?
It absolutely is a manipulative tool. And it captures the imagination. Even the idea of capturing imagination is, I don't know, a little sinister to me, but that's really what Hollywood is doing actively, is capturing the imagination of the audience.
Yeah, look this way.
Right. Right.
Like when we were in the theater and they would play the trailers and like everyone's looking forward and you're like, we better look back just to make sure.
Right. I use that analogy to Andrew. Like in my life, I feel like everyone around me is staring at the movie and I'm the only person with my head turned around looking at the projector.
Right.
Right. And I've been looking at the projector my whole life.
Right.
And pointing out to people around me, much to their dismay and irritation, hey, there's a projector back there.
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, after the film, we did cruise Hollywood a little more by foot.
Right.
And then we ended up in the bar with the bowling alley.
Right. So I don't know. It was our second or third bar we had been in that night. It was one of those nights, and we ended up at the Powerhouse
We were
bar.
drinking a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
but not in a belligerent way.
No, everything was good.
Just in a lubricating our drift way.
But we were considering, talking about these things that we were discovering, and the night went on until they kicked us out.
Yes, we shut down the Roosevelt. Let it be known.
We did, yeah. And then we said, well, where can we go? We went to the main living room, and they're like, no, you can't stay here. We're like, well, dude, where are we going to go? You got to go to the pool.
We were happily sauced, and we wanted to continue to be saucy, and nobody wanted to party with us, and the bars were all closed. So we asked security, well, where can we go and hang out? And he said, you can go hang out at the pool area.
Which was awesome, but cold.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Too
it
cold.
was awesome.
Yeah. So
it was awesome. But then, I guess we could finish with, we went back to the room, although, it was a laboratory, our room. So,
Yes.
like, I was going to sit in this chair and witness, through the window what
Right.
might have happened to Linda Goodman, who you mentioned
Right.
earlier, the novel, or the writer.
right.
And so I sat in this little wingback chair, trying not to fall asleep, looking through the window. We knew that we could see the cross, and by what time? Maybe 3:30, we could hear the echoes of the last drunkards piling out of some of the bars in
Right.
the neighborhood. Oh, the
Screaming
lights.
down the street.
Yeah, I know. It's good people.
Right.
And we could see the cross, and then I sat there till I think, the cross dimmed out. And the
Right.
lights of the buildings went out, and it was quiet. And just at that moment of, where the light starts to come up, and then it was back to normal. Hollywood was jiving again.
Another day in Hollywood.
Another day in Hollywood. So
that was our drift.
that was our drift with new eyes.
New eyes, fresh eyes.
Right. So should we say goodbye to the audience and have them stay tuned for our next drift?
Yeah, so we drifted several places in Los Angeles, and stay tuned for the next drift.
Thank you.
Thank you.